Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Guelph. This week I'm joined by Anna Schwanke. Anna is also known as the Zero Waste Gryphon on social media. Anna shares tips for living more sustainably, trying to reduce the waste in your life, and just other ways that you can be more mindful in how you move through the world. As always, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think given Guelph's reputation for being a very green, environmentally friendly city, I think a lot of listeners will too. So stay tuned for my conversation with Anna Schwanke. I'm joined by Anna Schwanke today on the Growing Guelph podcast. Anna, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk all about your, do you call it activism, or is that too strong of a...
Yeah, I wouldn't say activism. I would say...
passionate environmental lifestyle?
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to talk all about how you got into that, what you do and what you promote. Maybe just to kind of kick things off, what first sparked your interest in sustainability and the zero waste lifestyle? And was there a specific moment or influence that got you down this path?
Yeah, so I'd say the specific moment was one of my first co-op positions at university. In undergrad, was working for a company that did regulatory consulting for cosmetics, over-the-counter drugs, natural health products, things like that. And one day my boss said to me, people are so concerned about, the safety of the ingredients in their cosmetics and things like that, but they don't think about the damage that the packaging is doing to the environment. And that really got me thinking. And we did a little web article series on packaging and the impact of that on the environment. So that really kind of kickstarted me trying to live more zero waste and sustainable.
That's interesting with cosmetics in particular. So I'm by no means an expert of the cosmetic industry, but I have a friend who works at Sephora, and so sometimes when we go visit her, my wife and I will get to look through her sample packages of things. And I've noticed that for more luxury or high quality items, they tend to make the packaging heavier and more substantial, and it all seems to be in favor of having something in your hands that just feels more luxury. And for whatever reason, we associate that luxury with heft and weight.
Yeah.
But all that heft and weight is just packaging that has to be transported and isn't actually part of the active ingredient that you're buying for, right?
Exactly. And you're paying for that packaging as well. Like, it costs them money to have that packaging on the product. So they're going to obviously pass that on to the consumer as well.
And it's interesting how some of the most environmentally, and I know there's some debate on this, but the environmentally friendliness of packaging, the most lightweight, food secure way of shipping things is often very light plastics. But that can sometimes go against our common intuitions when it comes to, is something sustainable? Is it good that we've shipped it and things like that? And then when you're at the store and you're looking at things, it's like, oh, is it all just what do you call it? There's a name that someone came up with it. It's like environmental. It's something about washing.
Greenwashing. Yeah. Just the visual.
Exactly. Where this candle that comes in like a wooden box instead of a plastic thing, that feels more closer to like a natural roots of it or something like that.
Yeah.
When that might all just be pomp and circumstance for the purposes of selling the brand of something.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be very nuanced. Like, as you said, shipping things, if you're shipping it in lighter packaging, it's going to have less emissions associated with the transport. But then that lighter packaging, can it be reused or recycled, or is it just going to be thrown away? So there's a lot of aspects that come into whether or not an item is actually sustainable or not. And for the consumer, it can be really hard to make a judgment because you're not usually given all of the information.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably going to be the topic of this whole conversation, but just how these things get so much more complex when you get down into them. And again, I'm already getting us off on the tangents, but there's the idea of shipping and how sometimes the shipping that looks and is the most polluting to the world is also the most cost effective way. And thinking of thousands and thousands of big containers on a big container ship. That container ship is burning like hundreds of gallons of fuel to cross the ocean. But is that the most sustainable part of the journey of all those products? Because when all those individual things get to a port and then get loaded into individual trucks and then get like at the end of the journey, the least sustainable part of the journey might be you going to the store, picking up that one item and driving it back to your house.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's just an interesting concept for people to wrap their heads around, because it's like, oh, I'm going to the local shop and getting something, but like, yep, and you're using resources to get it. And
Exactly.
it's, yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's so nuanced, and there's so many different ways to actually live a sustainable lifestyle. I don't think that there's necessarily one right choice in every circumstance. It's going to depend on the individual and where they live and their resources and capacity. So
So I guess to get back to the journey that you went on, so what were you studying in school that, I mean, not that it led you down this path, but I'm sure it had some influence on your extracurricular and like focuses on the environment?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree was in physics, and then I always loved animals, but I knew I didn't want to be a vet, but I didn't know like what other career options there were. And then towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I found out that you could research like animal behavior and welfare. So I did my started a master's and then transferred to a PhD program in dairy cattle welfare and behavior.
Oh, cool. Guelph's a good place to be researching dairy cattle.
Yes, it is.
When did you finish your PhD?
I finished last August.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank
I know some people who went through the PhD process, and it's quite the ordeal.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was worth it to me.
Yeah, that's good. So you've been sharing your sustainability journey for about 6 years now, is that
Yeah,
right?
yep.
What inspired you to start documenting it publicly? And has your approach to sharing changed over time?
Yeah, so I think when I first started trying to live more sustainably, there were some people that I followed, but in Guelph, I didn't really see anyone who was kind of, I guess, like promoting this lifestyle on social media. So I was intending to reach kind of the university community, but, social media being what it is, it was Guelph, and then it was other cities and now other countries. So it's grown in that way. And yeah, I started documenting it online because I wanted people to see that there's different options, and what works for one person isn't necessarily what's going to work for another person. So by kind of documenting my journey from the start, I could share the different things that I've tried and why certain things did work or didn't work for me, and then give people those different paths or options that they could explore for actions they could take themselves.
Something that I really resonated with me about the way you describe your journey, for one, you're very transparent about it, which is nice, because it seems like you're kind of actively fighting against the influencer style speaking of just like the overly like being a bit of a cheerleader for something. And it's not that you're not a cheerleader for these ideals, but you're coming across as you the person and not like you the sustainability brand. In a recent post, you talked about how you're not a perfect environmentalist, how you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, you still drive a car, you don't make your own toothpaste. And what motivates you to be that transparent about that? Is that a reaction against some of the, I don't want to say that like the scolding behavior, but a lot of environmentalism, especially maybe closer to like 7-8 years ago, maybe when you started on this journey, could focus on the shame aspects of things, and you seem to like completely steer away from that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. 7 or 8 years ago, it was very black and white. Like, you're either hardcore zero waste environmentalist or you're not even trying. And there's such a spectrum in between. The way that I try and communicate that is in part a reaction to what it was like at that time, because working in the agricultural field, I have maybe a little bit different view of animal agriculture and agriculture in general than other people might. So I wasn't really interested in being vegan or vegetarian, and it kind of felt like, oh, if you're not doing that, then why are you even calling yourself an environmentalist?
Yeah.
And there's so many reasons why with dietary changes that people can't or don't want to make those changes, and those are all valid. And there's so many other things that you can do.
Yeah, and it truly is a spectrum of behavior. So I've worked in agriculture for a lot of my career as well, and it is interesting the polarization that can happen within agriculture. Like, especially if you work with, when you work in agriculture, you work with a lot of people who grow up on farms and things like that. I guess I should ask you, did you grow up on a farm or
I
grow up in
didn't
a...
I didn't grow up on a farm. My grandparents were involved with agriculture before I was born, so I grew up hearing a lot of stories about that.
Gotcha.
I kind of got into agriculture. I was a horse girl as a kid and a teenager, so that was kind of my introduction into that world. And then I found dairy science in university, and yeah.
I guess horse girls, horse people. They're in that little, they're in that perfect kind of bridge between the rural lifestyle and the urban or city lifestyle,
Yeah.
because you kind of have a foot in both
In both,
worlds.
yeah.
But yeah, in the agriculture spaces, people can get very polarized because I think the loudest, most passionate voices on the environmentalist side can often go, especially the ones that get the attention of the agriculture people, are the ones who are like very adamantly anti animal agriculture and things like that. And like, as someone who's worked in agriculture, I have critiques and issues with animal agriculture, but I just know too much about the process and know too much about the care of the people who work with the animals, and that, this is their living, and that so many Ontario farmers truly do see themselves as stewards and protectors of their animals, and kind of marrying that knowledge with the idea that, like, it still is exploitation of animals, but is all exploitation bad? I mean, when you're growing a seed, like a field of sunflowers, you wouldn't really call it exploiting the sunflowers, but sunflowers don't have, pain and things like
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, it is a very kind of interesting, messy world when it comes to those things. So it's always nice when people in agriculture can take a bit of a more nuanced view of that. Have you ran into any, I don't know if pushback's the right word, but like raised eyebrows at speaking to some of the environmentalism within the agriculture spaces that you also moved within?
Not so much in that space. I've had pushback kind of the other way in the environmental space when people find out that I do work in
Right.
agriculture.
They think it's like a betrayal that, like, you should be outside the slaughterhouse protesting and not
Yeah,
like
to some
enabling the
degree,
farmers
yeah.
that send product there.
Which, yeah, I think is unfortunate because, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the vast majority of people that are anti-agriculture have never been on a farm.
Yes. Well, I mean, and I don't think they're going to get invites anytime
No.
soon, especially, well, we're not going to go down some of the anti-protester laws and things like that, because again, yeah, it's a very messy world, and people on both sides of it are very quick to just be angry about it.
It's very, yeah, polarized and
But I mean, I say this to people in the agriculture space that I work with, where the fear and anxiety that we see the general public have, and that some of the environmentalists can sometimes latch onto or can like put up, that fear and anxiety is because people are disconnected from their food, and that disconnection leads to an ignorance, and that ignorance can get filled up by whoever is trying to push whatever thing to make them afraid. And that sometimes who's pushing that to make them afraid is on the anti big ag side.
Exactly.
Like there's people on both sides that are pushing narratives and trying to get you to feel a certain way, even if it's just the narrative of like, watch my documentary all about how animal agriculture is evil, or watch this documentary about how crop companies are stealing genetics and like, suing farmers. And there's a lot of people where if they're having a passionate voice in the game, it's hard for them not to kind of fall within one of the strong sides
it's
or the
hard
other.
to step back and consider other opinions.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to, I think your original question was on the honesty and transparency.
Yes. Thank you for pulling me back to my
that's
original
okay.
question. I appreciate a guest that can do that for me.
Yeah, but yeah, it did take me a little while to kind of find that because, yeah, online there is a lot of pressure to have, like the perfect aesthetic on your Instagram and, yeah, just to present the idealized picture perfect moments, but that's maybe less than 1% of your time and what you're doing in the day.
Yeah.
So.
And it can also lead to feelings of like hopelessness for an audience who feels like, well, if I can't live this lifestyle, then is there even a point to doing anything? And
Exactly.
I
And
think you would be the first to say that like any amount of activity that you do that is, cutting down on waste, cutting down on energy that you're using is steps in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
And everyone's journey is going to look different as you go there, right? Like there's some activities that require a lot of effort, and there's times in our lives where we have more of that effort to give and times where we have less, and maybe we have an injury or we have an illness or we have children or a new job, and some of those activities have to be
Put
scaled
on the back
back.
burner,
Exactly.
scaled back. Yeah, for sure.
But that doesn't mean that you're a bad person all of a sudden. Like we all as living creatures moving through the world require things. We require resources, and I think it's important not to only feel the guilt of the needing of those resources, because that's not all like taking is a waste anyway. Like that can be a negative way to look at it. Yeah. And I think that can lead down to some of the anti-human thoughts in general of like all human activity is a net negative in the world. Like I like humans. I like that there's a lot of us. I think there's ways that we could live all, 8 or 9 billion of us more sustainably, but I would almost want to categorically reject ideas that like, well, the problem is there's just too many of us. Exactly. Because I'm like,
that's so problematic.
What are the solutions to that problem look like? Like not ones I want to discuss on this podcast. So
fair enough. Yeah. And I think, kind of my philosophy is, as you said, everybody needs resources, and it's okay to want certain things that aren't needs as well, but make sure that you're making the most of those things and using them to the fullest.
Exactly. A vacation, flying down to a resort for a week or two, if you looked at from an environmental point of view, that can just be a complete like burning of all that jet fuel and like the fast fashion vacation clothes you might buy before the trip and the excess food and drink you'll eat on the trip. Like, or you could look at it as we're human beings and we need to fill up our cup with beachy weather in, when it's February in Ontario or things like that. And if that week of sunshine gives you the energy to live more sustainably when you get home, then like, was it a net waste? Like, we can't live our whole lives just by the metric of, are we like, what's the balance of our consumption?
Exactly. And I think, for the everyday person, taking a flight for a vacation is really a drop in the bucket compared to, things that multi-billionaires are doing.
Yes.
So.
I think about little things like that. Like when I stress about like, I discovered that I've left the light on in my basement or left like something relatively very small. And I'm like, oh, why did I do that? And then I think about like that warehouses that like I drive by in Guelph that I know have like great big floodlights that just stay on all night long in Guelph and things like that, where it's like, okay, right, like have some perspective, drop in the bucket, like
give yourself some grace.
Yeah, exactly. So you talk about building a supportive community. Community is often a big topic on this podcast. Can you share a time when someone in Guelph or maybe in the online community that you've developed has inspired you to keep going or try something new?
Yeah, so kind of one specific time I can talk about. It was one of my earlier posts that got some negative feedback. And that was really kind of my first experience with dealing with that kind of conflict online on like my own page. And, I do have a very supportive group of followers. So they, were very kind and kind of balanced out that negative feedback. And it can be hard to have those negative comments, especially because often they're coming from people you've never met. And people usually forget that there's somebody on the other side of that.
Yeah.
But then just, kind of day to day, there's been a lot of times where I've been like, am I even having any impact at all? Like, is this worth my time and my energy? But then I'll get a message from someone saying like, oh, what you posted the other day, I tried it and it was great, and I'm going to keep doing this moving forward. So just kind of those everyday interactions are really inspiring to me to keep doing what I'm doing.
That's good. That can be, I mean, I've experienced a little bit of that myself. I haven't experienced the negative pushback. I'm trying to steel myself for that, but just the positive, like, comments, especially when you're doing something that is sharing in an online space, it can feel like, oh, am I just like, like opening up my window and shouting into the street and like
Exactly.
nobody hears? And you see likes and you see engagement, but it can be hard to take that as something real and tangible.
Exactly, especially with, smaller followings, you get less engagement in terms of comments. So, yeah, it can be a little bit just spewing into the void, so to speak, for a while until
Yeah.
you, get another little keep going.
I think a lot of that, I mean, a lot of us probably feel very similar to that on social media. But as you said, that where people can forget is that there are real people sharing things. Still, I know, still there are real people. There's a lot of AI stuff on social media
Yeah.
too, but there's real people sharing things, and the motivation to like to engage with that, and to know that for every one person who does say something, there's probably 5 people who just took the advice and incorporated it into their life and did make sustainable changes, or it did impact them, even if you never hear anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for the detractors, like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about how the internet has a way of sort of legitimizing everything that everyone says, where, you read, like, it's easy to, like, if you're reading Reddit comments or something, it's easy to be like, oh, you read like a very well crafted, like, this person knows what they're talking about. And then the next one, you kind of read in the same voice, even if it's just an angry crank. Even like, we don't have the context clues to know who you can kind of ignore.
Yeah.
Versus, like, if you're in if you're at a concert hosted by Guelph at, like, say, in front of the city hall, if there was someone like shouting annoying things at a band, and everyone could quickly understand that it's like a 17-year-old who's trying to be edgy, it's so easy to just dismiss that person.
Yeah.
But that 17-year-old who's trying to be edgy kind of looks like everyone else in the crowd when you're only reading their comments online.
Exactly. That's such a good point.
And it's so much harder to just dismiss out of hand, or
Yeah.
you can sense when someone's negativity is just coming because they're in a bad place and they're just lashing out at whatever. And in that moment, you happen to take the brunt of that. But if it wasn't you, it would have been the very next post about
person,
like
yeah.
something that they would have found an issue
The
to
things
have.
that people get worked up about online, sometimes I'm just like, really, you wasted your energy to ruin someone else's day like that?
Yeah, talk about true net negatives of things that don't fill up people's cups and don't like add to but they used their, they paid their internet bill, and they paid the electricity, and that's how they spent their own time. So in some of the things that you talk about that motivate you mentioned foraging, geocaching. So just to stop there real quick, is geocaching still a thriving thing? Because I'm only asking because I haven't dipped my toes into that in like years, but I remember discovering geocaching when I was like 12 or 13 years old, as part of like the pre-app days of the internet, where you had to like go to this place, you had to like get the coordinates. You didn't have a smartphone when you went to the place, so you had to like just search like. And for people to know, geocaching is, I think it started as like an online community of people hiding. How do you even say it? Like,
It's basically like a worldwide scavenger hunt.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, imagine if you're walking in the woods, and then there's like off the trail, a little bit off the trail, there's like a tree. Then in the back of the tree, there's a natural hole in the tree. And when you put your hand in there, someone has like put a little Tupperware container. And then when you open that up, it's got like a little notebook that you can sign. And it's got maybe some stickers or like a memento. And it's just
Yeah.
kind of a fun way for humans to connect with each other out of time, if that makes sense. Or like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
community of people who are just...
And yeah, explore other areas and yeah.
It's like the exact like when you're playing a video game and you get the little hit of dopamine for finding a thing, and it's like the real life version of that.
Yeah.
But sorry, so you talked about foraging, geocaching, and sustainable wedding planning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's clear that your lifestyle integrates sustainability into joyful and creative activities. How do you keep the joy in this work, even when tuning into like the news about the environment can feel heavy?
Yeah, so I think the key is recognizing the positive impact that you are making and not focusing on things that you're not doing or the bigger disasters, so to speak.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of recognizing when, like, it's great to be informed about the environmental news, but at a certain point, if it's stopping you from doing things because it's feeling hopeless, is that really serving a purpose anymore?
Yeah.
And, I think sometimes, especially with social media and things get magnified and amplified, you can see the same thing over and over and over again. So it's just building up.
Yeah, and there's nothing more you can do with that. Like once you're aware of an environmental fact and you're aware of like the voting choices that you're going to make in that you can make, then the continuing like slow drip of that negativity can just be doing like psychic damage to yourself for no betterment.
Exactly. And yeah, I think a lot of activities that are sustainable kind of have like a natural add-on effect, like foraging and geocaching. It's outdoors, you're being active, you're getting, those endorphins as well. So I think that helps, that the actions that you can take to combat the negative news fill your cup and give you capacity to deal with that information.
Yeah. And an important reminder, this came up recently in my conversation with Guelph reporter Adam A. Donaldson, where we were talking about how like the news does inform you, but the news has a very they have a very pointed goal, which is to make you feel something. And often when it comes to the news, the easiest emotion that they can elicit is like fear, worry, anxiety, anger, strong negative emotions. So when you look at news headlines, they tend to focus on that, especially just like if you're looking at what's top of the top of like the big news sites. If you go to, for example, the University of Guelph has a news section. Their news section is not going to be doom and gloom. It's going to be the interesting research and news happening at the university.
Solutions based.
Exactly. There's you probably have to do a little bit of in the middle to I don't want to say be truly informed, but obviously, like we said, being aware of the negativities of the world is important, but just there is such thing as too much awareness. And as came up with that conversation with Adam, we live in a really, really big world, and that gives us a lot of opportunities for negative facts, for negative headlines, for environmental disasters that could be happening all over the world that can, whatever their size or impact, can just be sort of magnified in putting it all together. Like if you wanted to if you wanted to start a Twitter and subscribe to every environmentalist news that you could, like you could fill your feed with nothing but bad times.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be good for any human soul to just take in that amount of destruction. Neither would it be good to try to be aware of every single murder in the world. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of murders. That doesn't mean, but if you did nothing but focus on that, then you're going to be afraid to, step outside in Guelph, even though it's not reflective of like the risk that you'd face.
Yeah.
But
And I think, a lot of environmentalists online have become aware of kind of the news cycle and how negative it can be. And there's a lot of them out there that are focusing on the positive environmental stories as well to counterbalance. So
I think our entire culture is having in real time like the reactions to what social media is doing to us, because it's so new that we're figuring it out in real time, where we're like, oh, like look at the kids seem like really negatively impacted by growing up with social media, like, and then we try to switch, but we can only start to like make these course corrections once we're like knee deep in the effects of it. Thank you for being part of the solution of whether it's a solution or not, but being proactive at being a positive light when it comes to those things. Are there any environmentalist or like sustainability connections that you've made that have turned into like real friendships or real bonds? It's okay if the answer is no to that
Yeah.
too.
So I would say I have made friends online, but a lot of them are like in different countries or
Yeah,
different cities. So it's
people you're
been,
friendly with and that.
yeah, but very little
Yeah.
in-person interaction. Before COVID, I did meet up with a few people to like do some mending together and things like that. Um, but yeah, and then also there are a lot of environmentalists who have stepped back from social media just because there is a lot of um, negativity directed at you in some cases, or just pressure to portray this perfect lifestyle like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Do you ever find that you're having to run like a mental algorithm before you're sharing something just in terms of that? Could this be perceived in a negative way, or could this, or are you found that you're in a pretty good place where you're not having to pre-screen everything before you put it out?
um I think I'm in a pretty good place. I mean, for stories I don't really bother too much because they're, like fairly short term content. With my posts and reels, I will, look over things a few times just to make sure I'm not unintentionally saying something that's, yeah, going to be controversial, or, yeah, taking into consideration like intersectionality with
Yeah.
different issues as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of that where it seems like online there's a growing, like, I don't want to say scary, but there's a growing part of the population that have just tossed out any of those considerations and are just like unabashedly being like, nope, like Trump's reelected, woke's out the door, we're just going to say whatever we want and like reject all of that. And it seems like people like yourself who are considerate and thoughtful of those things are the ones that, it's almost like people who are educated about things are the least likely to be like super confident about it because they know what they don't know and they have that kind of firsthand account. But yeah, a lot of us I think are in that same space where that consideration can make us hesitant in times because we don't want to say the wrong thing.
Exactly.
But it's also nice to know that there seems like there's a lot of energy of let's not pull people down because they phrased something in a way that they shouldn't have, or they used a term for something that they shouldn't have. Like, I think we're seeing some of that, like cancel culture can be more considered. And like,
Yeah.
if
And
the mob is going to rise up against someone, like, let's cancel the right people. Let's not cancel someone whose heart's in the right place. And then,
yeah, there's a difference between making a mistake and misspeaking versus having
like, an agenda
core
to,
beliefs that are not right.
yeah, that's a good word. Not right. I can get behind that. So Guelph has a strong culture of environmental activism and local sustainability efforts. Uh, how have you found your place within that? And do you have any like collaborations or local connections that have been meaningful to you?
Yeah, so in terms of finding my place in the Guelph community, as I said, I kind of started off trying to target the university community, and it's grown beyond that. And I think, yeah, what we talked about before, like being honest and sharing my journey from the start, is something a little bit different. And yeah, I also really try to highlight things in the community that people can do. I know a lot of larger accounts, they try to be, a lot more general to like include people in other countries and other cities. But I think it's also important to make change within your own community. So
Yeah.
often I'm like, oh, if you're in Guelph, check out this store or this initiative or local business. So
Well, that's a nice thing about Guelph is that it's small enough that you can feel good about having a focus on just the city. I mean, that's the literal the name and the focus of this podcast, and it's partially just like to what you were saying is like paying attention to the things that we can have an impact on, that or for me, I want to talk to the people who are in some ways either focused on the community of Guelph or at least have that as a primary concern. I wonder, like for you, so your social media account, the Zero Waste Gryphon, that makes total sense to me as someone who, my journey to Guelph started at the university. So I would have first and foremost considered myself a Gryphon.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I eventually became, I guess, a Guelphite after graduating. How's that? Like, what was your... So I guess I should ask, did you grow up in Guelph or did you grow up in the area? Like what brought you to Guelph? Was it the university?
Yeah, so my parents both went to Guelph for university. I was born out near Peterborough. Grew up for a little while in Barrie, and then my family moved to Australia, and then we came back to Canada. But since I started my undergraduate degree at Guelph, and I haven't left, so...
Sounds like your parents would have been, like, they're right in that exact demographic that I have talked about so much on this podcast, which is people who were drawn to Guelph for the university, and then something about the town just struck them the right way.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, we could put down roots here. And, obviously it sounds like your family had some journeys around the globe before, but does being a member of the wider Guelph community, has that informed your environmental activism? And like I find myself charged up by how sincerely the Guelph community embraces those sorts of things, and you see it in every element of your everyday. Like if you look at the events that the city puts on, if you look at the things that like the city, not just the city, and when I say the city I mean people within the city, like on social media, and the at Hillside, if you look at the way the garbage and the recycling works at Hillside Music Festival, I think all of it just loops back to this wider consciousness of the environment that Guelph very proudly lives.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when I was younger, my mom would talk about Guelph being, very environmentally friendly and socially conscious as well. And some of the other projects that I've been involved in that intersect with environmentalism have been really key to how I view that part of my lifestyle. So during the first part of my graduate degree, I was working on an interdisciplinary project with the Seed, which deals with food insecurity in the community. So that really opened my eyes to how, we have this huge issue with food waste, but we also have this huge issue with food insecurity. And it just makes no sense to me how we can't solve that.
Yeah, it truly is like a logistics thing, right? Where capitalism is good at solving some problems, like the efficient movement of goods from the places they're made to the consumer. Capitalism can get that done well, but then as soon as you're outside the bounds of like when it comes to food waste, there's no money in it, and then therefore these problems can just kind of accumulate, and then you end up with these things that can just be tragedies of sustainability where I deal with this. So right now I'm working part-time with the Salvation Army, and I'm as part of my job I go to the Seed in Guelph. I pick up some stuff that they have. I go to various grocery stores, and then all that food is set to be thrown out. It's rescued and it's given to people who are in need of food in Guelph. And so I've only interacted with the Seed just a little bit. I've got to get them on this podcast because like the little bit that I've seen within the warehouse and the people there, like they are truly at the center of like trying to solve that problem.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And it's heartening to see so much intellect and energy being devoted to solving those, like we said, solving the problems that aren't going to make anyone rich, but they are going to stop good food from going to landfills and helping people who need it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also a lot of online groups that I've been a part of over the years that are, again, kind of intersecting with environmentalism. Some of them are food share groups, so similar idea. If you have surplus food at home, you can redistribute it within the community. And then things like trading groups. So I moved recently, and as I was packing, I was going through things and sorting through things that we don't use anymore or don't need. And I was able, through one group, to either trade for things that we did need, or in another group to give them away to people who were looking for those items. I think a lot of the time the easiest option is to drop it off at a donation center, but
Yeah.
maybe you working at the Salvation Army can tell me if I'm right in saying this or not, but a lot of things that get donated don't make it onto the shelves.
It can be tricky, yeah. And I see this, like, I go and pick up some of the food barrels that are at various places, and people should definitely donate to those, and we do everything we can to use all of that stuff. But if we get a package of granola bars and they're like 3 years expired or something like that, then it's either not safe to give out to people, or they just have to be taken carefully.
Yeah,
And
but
all of
even
that,
things like clothes and homewares that get donated.
yeah,
And I think it probably varies based on whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit thrift store.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those things I think don't even make it onto the shelves.
Yeah, that can be disheartening too, where you think of the extra energy that people spent on the donating part, and now it's like, oh, like not only did the item not go for anything, but like, did that make the gas that went into driving it to the thing, like, was that also in vain?
Yeah.
But
And people, made the effort to not just throw it in the garbage.
yeah,
And then, it ends up there anyway. So.
yeah, that to your point about the other ways that we can interact as communities, especially in the trading of things. I know years ago when I lived in Toronto, it was the height of buns
Yes.
being a thing.
Yeah, so it's been renamed, I
BUNZ.
think.
Yeah, because I know the buns, they sort of they I hadn't even thought about this stuff until years, but they had that whole app, and they had like a currency within the app that was I'm not even going to try to go down the pathway of explaining to listeners if they weren't part of that whole saga. It was an online community that became like a legit company that then imploded on itself, but those same spirit and those same people involved and the users of those communities are still active in the trading of things. And I think if you're talking to someone who's never engaged in that, they'd say like, well, what do you mean? Like, I have a guitar I don't want to play, and then someone has a toaster and I trade them, and like, yeah, maybe that could work. But it's also my wife was gathering all of the additional surplus hens and chicks from our garden, and she posted on a local group just saying like, hey, if anyone has any food items that you're not using, we could take those. And like, that's a great way of doing it, because you could ask for money. You could say like, oh, a couple bucks, but the people get a different valuation of things when they're thinking of like, oh, a couple bucks, and then like, that means something to them. But if the idea is like, hey, everyone has a couple things in their pantry that it's gathering dust and like you're not going to use, like, take that, trade it for a thing that you want, and then the person that you trade it for will happily make use of that. Or if they can't make use of it, they can donate it to something, and it can be nice, especially when you're talking in, I mean, that's literal, just plants that have grown in our yard. That is nice to do something with it and not just put it in a bag and have them pick it up and compost it.
Yeah, for sure.
For people in Guelph who want to make sustainable choices, but they don't know where to start because it feels too overwhelming, what small changes do you think can make the biggest difference and are the easiest to kind of get that momentum going?
Yes, I think the small changes are probably going to be the ones that are going to save you money.
That can be to go back to the idea of capitalism.
Yeah.
That can be a very powerful motivator to see the sustain, like the money in your bank account that you didn't have to spend.
Exactly. And also like things that you're going to see a tangible difference in. So something that I did a lot when I first started was doing a waste audit or a trash audit. So basically what that is for a certain amount of time. I usually do a month, but you could do a week or 2 weeks or however long you think is best for you. You hang on to all of the trash that you make, basically. Whether that's physically putting it in a bag, a box, a container, or you take a picture of it before you throw it away. And then at the end, you look back through all of that stuff and look at what is the majority of your waste.
Mm-hmm.
And you could either pick, the thing that's making up the majority of it, or if that's something that maybe feels like too much of a change right now, find something else in that. So something might be carrots. If you're buying carrots from the grocery store, can you buy them loose instead of buying them in a bag? If you're buying carrot sticks, can you cut them up and store them in the fridge instead of buying them in multiple little baggies?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Do you remember when you first started doing your food audits? What were the surprising things you learned about your consumption habits, or things that...
I think a lot of it for me at the start, because as I said, I'm not vegan, I'm not vegetarian, was like the packaging for meat and things like that.
I'm bad at someone who cares about like recycling and things like that, but I overestimate what can be recycled. And it's easy. And I think partly it's just like, well, look at me, like my whole recycling bin's full, and it's like, well, is it full of things that they're just going to toss out?
Are you wish cycling or...
Yeah. Is that, what did you call it? Sorry?
Wish cycling.
Yes.
Putting it in the recycling, just hoping it'll get recycled.
Oh, I've 100% been guilty of that. Like, oh, this black plastic thing, like they can probably deal with this. And it's like, but it's almost like, oh, but I did my part. And then if they choose to not recycle it, then it's on them, right? But
the trash audit works for recycling as well. It works for food waste. You can do it for any area that you think would be beneficial for you. And then, simple things as well, like things that don't necessarily need an alternative or a replacement, or things that are really very low effort. So, for example, if you're at a restaurant and you order a burger, and every time you order a burger, you take the lettuce and the tomato off, why don't you just ask them not to put it on?
Yeah.
It's very low effort.
It requires just a tiny bit of, not even awkwardness. Your waiter or waitresses don't care. They're not judging you. But yeah, that's a good point. Like the little things that we can do. I think that it's the importance of not being stuck in the all or nothing mentality, where just any amount of changes is positive. In terms of looking ahead, what's your hope for how Guelph continues to grow as a sustainability-minded community? And are there any ways that you'd love to see individuals, organizations, or even the city itself build on the energy that's already here?
Yeah, so as we talked about, like Guelph is already known as being environmentally friendly and socially conscious. So I think to build on that, I'd like to see a lot more systemic changes at the city level. So things like concerted efforts to minimize food waste and redistribute it. Maybe, like I know there's a lot of individual initiatives teaching people how to do things like compost or mend clothes, but just to kind of amplify those efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there's got to be, and maybe skilled economists could come up with ways that incentivize these sorts of things. That, like I know, like the carbon tax was a pretty controversial thing, but like for example, if grocery stores could be rewarded in not just the existing ways of being rewarded, where they can say like, oh, we scanned these things out, they were donated, give us a tax rebate on like these donations, but some sort of real way of tracking and saying like, hey, they went out of their way, they spent some employee time to make sure that this pallet worth of food that was still good but they couldn't put on the shelf or couldn't sell made it to the seed, for example, or made it to a food bank, and some sort of way of tracking and then rewarding those companies.
Yeah.
And then maybe like, is there a way to reward individuals for those sorts of things too? I think any system that is made has to be very carefully considered so that people aren't just maliciously trying to gain it to get a reward out of it. But
yeah, in terms of individual actions that people can take, first of all, just starting.
Yeah.
Anything to start is great, but
And don't beat yourself up if you start on a Monday and on Tuesday, something comes up and you like your cat throws up all over your house and you use half a roll of paper
Yeah.
towels in cleaning it. Like everyone's been there, and like that's fine. Emergencies happen.
Yeah.
Paper towels exist for a reason. You don't have to feel bad about using them. But
Yeah.
I know I'm someone who like I found myself slipping into the little habits of like using way too many paper towels. Like why am I using why am I grabbing 3 paper towels for like a task that maybe doesn't even need a paper towel, and I can use one of my dishcloths or something. And then yeah, just those little sustainability habits, because the waste could just come so easily.
Yeah.
Like the keeping your car idling, or keeping like turning the thermostat up a little bit in the winter versus putting on a sweater. Like these, it's always easier to just burn the resources and burn the energy versus the little bit more
Yeah.
thoughtfulness
I,
of
I
like.
think I think where we're at as a society, a lot of us don't value those resources and energy for what they are and what it involves to get them to us, and what happens when we actually use them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, with the potential tariffs coming in from the States, or if there's some kind of economic downturn, and even aside from those, just like the bigger changes that could happen as a result of climate change, like, will it take something like, I don't want to say disaster, but like an economic downturn? Like, so to get to the point of what I'm saying is that I think some of us have grown up with either parents or grandparents who were influenced by growing up near the Great Depression, and
Yeah.
how that idea of like, how dare you throw that away? It's still good, or like that's a perfectly good box, it's a perfectly good jar. That mindset for them didn't come from, as far as I'm aware, from like an environmental goal. It came from a necessity. And I think that the two do kind of work hand in hand, right? Like trying to live on less and do more with what we have. If Ontario, of Guelph, is impacted by tariffs, if our food banks are stressed, all of these things would benefit from people acting more sustainably and thinking in terms of community mindedness. So hopefully it doesn't come to those sorts of motivators. I think that I think we're already along that path anyway.
Yeah.
So if things do get quote unquote bad in that way, we've got a lot of people who've got a lot of good ideas to help us. This conversation has made me interested in like, where did the environmental roots of Guelph come from? And it's okay if you don't have an answer to this. I'm just sort of asking out loud, like, what put Guelph down that path to begin with, as a city where it's like it'd be interesting to explore that with like what were some of the first movements within the city. And I'm sure it probably just stems from a few dedicated voices that have established the feel of Guelph as a city.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look into.
So is there anything you want to leave our listeners with, either for them to check out, or if people are curious about your journey and want to follow you, like where can they learn more, or resources that you'd like to direct people towards?
Yeah, so I guess, like take home message is, there's a lot of different ways that you can start. The most important thing to do, though, is to actually start. That's going to look different for everybody. Yeah, if you want to see what I do and my journey, I'm on Instagram at the Zero Waste Gryphon.
Cool. And I guess zero waste is a goal that you'll never achieve, but it's just an idea to steer towards, right?
Yeah, so to me, it's this idea of not necessarily, in the early years, it was, fitting all your trash for the year in a mason jar. But to me, it kind of embodies the idea of, if you're going to use a resource, don't waste it.
Yeah, that's the key word there is waste, because if you used it and you enjoyed it, just like taking a vacation, you burn some fuel to get there, but if you use that fuel for a good reason, then it wasn't a waste. If you bought a huge bag of carrots and ate one carrot and then threw the rest in the garbage because you let them go bad, then maybe that is a waste. So But again, don't beat yourself up over it. Start small.
It looks different for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to end things. Thanks so much for joining me today, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to. Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.